Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. This is the post-game podcast. The Timberwolves led by as many as 26 over the Mavericks, but it still came down to the final possession, and Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards stole the show in Kyrie Irving's debut game in Dallas with the Mavericks. We're going to break down what exactly happened in this one, the fantastic coaching adjustments, and also that amazing final play, the defensive stand from McDaniels and Edwards. It's all coming to the show. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Happy Tuesday, everybody. It is a Victory Tuesday. This is the postgame podcast after the Wolves' exciting win over the Dallas Mavericks on Monday night. That's what today's show is all about. There's plenty to get to. A big thank you, though, first of all, for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms, from Apple to Google to Spotify to Odyssey. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find this show. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app, and you can find that app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves, and also my account, which is at Beecken, and that's 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. All right. Exciting game between the Wolves and Mavs Monday night. The Wolves are continuing to alternate wins and losses now over the past couple of weeks. After a tough loss Friday night against Memphis, the Timberwolves bounced back in a big way as they close out this road trip in Dallas. This was Kyrie Irving's debut game in Dallas. This was his, I think, fourth game with the Mavericks. Only his second game with Luka Doncic. Luka missed Kyrie's first two games with that sore heel. So the first game or second game for Kyrie and Luka to play together. The first game that Kyrie Irving's played at American Airlines Center in Dallas. I get center and arena, of course, mixed up. Whatever. I digress. The arena in Miami has a similar name. Anyway, Kyrie's first game in Dallas as a member of the Mavericks. So a ton of energy in the building, a big night, and the Wolves rose to the occasion. I do want to get into the first half because I think there's some fascinating coaching things here, some fascinating things scheme-wise for the Wolves, but we have to start with the final play of this game. I'd be remiss to not start there. The Wolves, to set it up, I don't want to go blow by blow here, but to set it up, the Wolves are up 26 in the third quarter. It gets all the way, Luka has a crazy third quarter. Kyrie has a crazy fourth quarter. The Timberwolves have to go small to combat the Mavs. We'll get more into that later, and Chris Finch's adjustments on the Wolves side. Comes down to the final play, a 3-point game after Mike Conley splits a pair of free throws. Mavs have about 14 seconds or so. They're inbounding after timeout. McDaniels is guarding Doncic and tips the inbounds pass into the backcourt. So that wastes 3 or 4 seconds. Doncic brings the ball up. And then Kyrie's been guarded by Anthony Edwards. Doncic is being guarded by Jaden McDaniels. And clearly Dallas just wanted to flatten out and let those two go to work. And it's understandable, right? We're talking about two of the best isolation players, two of the best overall offensive players in the league right now. It's maybe aggressive to call it. It might be a bit hyperbole to a bit of hyperbole to call them two of the best of the generation yet. But in terms of ISO scorers, guys that can get a shot off at any point in time, the two of the best of the last decade or so, I think is what I said on the postcast with Marnie after the game. And McDaniels and Anthony Edwards did not allow the Mavericks to get a shot off. Not just a tough shot. Not a shot. Ant locked down Kyrie. Both McDaniels and Ant did a fantastic job staying down. And then at one point, I think it was McDaniels that kind of did a flyby. Like, they just avoided contact, too. They didn't bite badly on pump fakes. They kept their position. They helped each other when one was out of position. And it was just like this 12 to 14 seconds from hell for Dallas, where the Wolves just completely smothered them. It was such a phenomenal display of length, of athleticism, of overall defensive technique, of understanding like, hey, we can win this game by locking in defensively. And McDaniels and Anthony Edwards did exactly that. It's really, really hard to understate how impressive that is. Like, how often do you see a team not get a shot off at the end of a game, much less a team that has two of the best handful of offensive players on the planet for the last several years? Like, these guys are perennially two of the best offensive players in the league, from a craftiness standpoint, from a handles standpoint, especially with Kyrie, from an ability to get a shot off from wherever they want, however they want, against whomever they want. And McDaniels and Ant, especially McDaniels, who's been, often foul prone, and especially, early in this game as well, to defend without fouling and not allow them to even get a shot off is so incredible. Like, it bears repeating over and over and over again. It is so impressive. And it wasn't like this obviously was a very specific instance, but I don't want the defense for much of the game to be obscured by the fact they gave up 121 points, because 39 of that was in the fourth quarter, and a lot of that was just Kyrie Irving doing Kyrie Irving things that he does sometimes. The Wolves defensively were quite good in this game, for most of it, and I do want to get to that. Let's talk a little bit about that now. Actually, let's talk about the coaching, the scheme, some of the adjustments in the game. So the Wolves actually opened this game playing high wall pick and roll coverage, which they've done against Luka Doncic previously this season. Remember, the Wolves had split 2 games against the Mavs earlier in the season, and the Wolves are back to playing high wall coverage. So a little bit of context, if you're not familiar, the Timberwolves played a lot of high wall, pretty much exclusively high wall last year with Jared Vanderbilt, with Karl-Anthony Towns, basically blitzing the defense, trying to trap ball handlers. It's a little bit different than the ice pick and roll concept they played under Tom Thibodeau, but basically wherever the pick and roll happens, you try and bring your big all the way up to the level of the screener and essentially trap the ball. And it works really, really well, unless the opposing team is really well coached and or really crafty and very good at passing the ball, not panicking, right? A patient offense can beat high wall coverage relatively easy. If they can make a really nice skip pass, if they have cutters that understand the timing of it. And we saw that late last season. The Timberwolves struggled and they had to revert to try and, a lot of switching, things like that defensively. Rudy Gobert played in Utah almost exclusively drop coverage, and the Jazz would drop him against everybody. So the Wolves this year have shown the ability to mix in some high wall. And Gobert, they asked him to be mobile and play high wall in this game against Doncic. And early in the game, there was one possession where he moved his feet. He slid all the way to the corner with Luka, stayed in front of him the whole way, and ended up forcing, I think the Mavs got a tough shot on the possession, maybe ended up getting fouled later in the possession. But Gobert rose to the challenge early in this game and was fantastic when the Wolves were playing that high wall coverage. They were forcing the ball to Luka's hands as much as possible, at least making him try and turn the corner and have a tough time doing it. I thought it was the right thing to do early in the game. The Wolves gave the Mavs trouble. They really did. I mean, Minnesota had a 10-point lead after the first quarter. We're talking about the number 7 offense in the league. In Dallas, they had 23 points in the first quarter. And the Wolves really, again, made things difficult for them. As the game wore on, Dallas kind of did away with high pick and roll. They ran a lot more just straight isolation and just said, hey, you can't guard, none of you guys can actually guard Luka one-on-one, which, I'd put Jaden McDaniels up against Luka one-on-one if we're not calling ticky-tack fouls, but we all know that Doncic is very adept at drawing fouls, and it is a skill set. He shot 15 free throws in this game, a lot of those early in the game, and then also in the third quarter, Luka kind of went off, and McDaniels picked up some early fouls, but for the most part did pretty well. And it just kind of became like, hey, can you guard me one-on-one without fouling? And the answer is often no. And Dallas just spread the floor. And as the game wore on, we saw this in the fourth quarter. They basically they went small with Dwight Powell at the center. I mean, he was their starting center, but they stayed small, right? They kept Christian Wood on the bench down the stretch. For the most part, they didn't play JaVale McGee hardly at all in this game. And they spread the floor out and let Kyrie and Luka Doncic go to work in the middle of the floor and basically played Rudy Gobert off the floor for Minnesota. Chris Finch had to take him out of the game when the lead went from 26 all the way down to 12 or 10 or something like that. To be clear, Rudy was a major reason why the Timberwolves built the 26-point lead in the first place, because Dallas cannot contend with size in the paint like that with Dwight Powell and Christian Wood, and that's really it as far as bigs, right? So Rudy was a massive part literally and figuratively, pun intended, I guess, um, of building this lead, of building a 26-point lead. The Timberwolves, their 33 points in the first quarter, I think 26 of them were in the paint. Something like 3/4 of their first half points came in the paint. And Rudy was obviously huge there. He finished the game with 21 and 14. But down the stretch, Chris Finch made the adjustments he needed to make. I want to talk a little bit more about those adjustments, and then get into also the other things the Wolves did well, actually offensively as well, early in the game. So we're going to do that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secured, super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything, from the money line to point scores and threes drained. And let me tell you what, the NBA All-Star Weekend is one of my favorite times, on the heels of the Super Bowl, no less, which is my other favorite time to get involved with betting on FanDuel. I mean, it's the absolute best place to do it. And All-Star Saturday is a ton of fun as well. FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's talk a little more about Chris Finch's adjustments in this game. I talked a little bit about the defense adjustment, needing to adjust to the Mavs adjustment, right? Dallas going more flattening out, playing a lot of ISO ball, and then playing Gobert. I mean, frankly, they did play him off the floor. But again, Gobert is a big reason why they built the lead. The Timberwolves have the flexibility to go small. Obviously, still no Karl-Anthony Towns, but with Kyle Anderson on the floor late in this game, effectively playing center down the stretch, the Timberwolves, they won this game. They held on down the stretch in part because they were able to put Anderson on the ball and be a little creative with Edwards and McDaniels and try and switch some things. And they were doing that. Conley was, they actually put Conley on, I think he was guarding Josh Green for a stretch. He was actually guarding Reggie Bullock for a little while down the stretch. And they're like, the Wolves were in a sense hiding Conley because the on-ball defense isn't what it was, and it's not what it is for Ant or McDaniels, but also comfortable switching him if the situation calls for it, right? Like, you're comfortable with Conley switching on to Kyrie Irving. Comfortable is maybe not the right word. You're okay with it, right? Like, it's permissible if that's what has to happen. But it was a way for the Wolves to stay small and be able to switch things if they needed to, and really, again, try and make life difficult for Dallas. It was pretty clear what Dallas was going to try and do, right? They're not ultra creative. They generally don't need to be, with two of the best ISO scorers in the league. Only 3 players on the Mavericks' entire team scored more than 6 points in this game. Kyrie had 36. Luka had 33. Christian Wood had 24 off the bench. Nobody else scored more than 6 points in this entire game. It was pretty obvious what they were trying to do. And the Wolves, again, for really the first 2.5 quarters, they didn't entirely shut the Mavs down. I mean, they had 54 at halftime, but they really hampered what Dallas was trying to do. And then Luka kicked it into gear in the third. Kyrie did that in the fourth, and things looked a little different. But I thought the Wolves had a really good strategy coming into this game defensively. Offensively, a couple of notes. First of all, the Wolves did a really good job playing fast in this game. Dallas came into this game, I believe, 29th. Yeah, 29th in pace. So Dallas wants to slow you down, and they're good at doing that. They themselves, like, Dallas is more than happy to play in the half court. They lead the league in free throw rate offensively themselves. They lead the league in three-point attempt rate. They're 11th in three-point percentage. Dallas will slow it down and do the Luka Kyrie thing all day long. But the Wolves, to their credit, were able to speed Dallas up and get the Wolves were able to get more possessions, increase the pace of the game. The Wolves came into the game 4th in pace in the league. Again, Dallas 29th. And that was a big part of Minnesota building this early lead, was getting those points in transition early. And also just generally, even if they weren't scoring in transition, because I think Dallas actually ended up with a slight edge, maybe a bucket in transition and fast break points in the game overall. but just the overall pace of the game being faster benefits the Wolves, right? And they did that early. And then the ball movement was fantastic. And I have to shout out, like, Mike Conley's line is not like, I'm sure D'Lo stands look at this and they're like, 12-9, who cares? Look what D'Lo does for the Lakers now. Great. Mike Conley can throw a bounce pass in pick and roll game. And I don't know that I saw D'Angelo Russell throw more than a handful of those in a Timberwolves uniform, right? I'm exaggerating a little, but not all that much, honestly. Conley in pick and roll game, the pocket passes he was throwing, the chemistry with Rudy's obvious, but just the overall feel is so impressive. And we did start to see a few more twists on different horn sets for the Wolves. They had one where Kyle Anderson was at one of the elbows. I believe Ant was at the other, and Anderson just faked a handoff and kept the ball and drove and scored. There's so many different variations of this. And now, especially with the passing ability that Jaden McDaniels has shown lately and his increasing comfort level putting the ball on the floor, everyone besides Rudy Gobert is basically like somebody that you're comfortable playmaking. Conley, obviously Anthony Edwards, Kyle Anderson. In this game, Taurean Prince actually started in place of Anderson. Anderson came off the bench. All those guys, you're comfortable with those players making those decisions and essentially initiating offense from the elbows in a sense, or at least making that decision. It's almost like the mesh point in football, right? When the quarterback hands the ball to the running back, those dribble handoff actions out of horn sets are the point in time where that player needs to make a decision. And Kyle Anderson can quarterback your offense, much like he'll sit in the middle of a zone and pick you apart. Dallas tried zone a couple of times after timeouts, and the Wolves did really well handling it. But Kyle Anderson at the elbow is also a really good solution, and Karl-Anthony Towns is going to get the opportunity to do that here when he comes back eventually as well. But I thought the Wolves' offensive creativity was good, pushing the pace was good, and the overall ball movement, which starts with Mike Conley, but it extends to everybody in the lineup. Conley had 9 assists in this game, only 2 turnovers in 32 minutes, and one was a bit of a cross-up. I think it was actually more Ant didn't quite get where he needed to be. I think he was a little too deep on the perimeter. Conley thought he'd be in one spot, not another, chemistry thing, and just missed him. But Conley had 9 assists. Taurean Prince had 5 assists and no turnovers in 22 minutes in the starting lineup. Ant only had 1 assist, but Conley and Prince and Kyle Anderson, who also had 5 assists, were all fantastic passing the ball. And the overall ball movement in the Timberwolves half-court offense was very impressive. It was decisive. It was crisp. The ball was flying around the perimeter. There were cutters. They were making the right choices. And really, the Timberwolves only made 9 threes in this game. They were 9 of 29 from deep. Imagine if they make a couple more threes. If they just hit a couple of open threes, this game never gets close, right? It probably stays above 30 points in terms of the deficit. Dallas probably never pulls all the way closer. Kyle Anderson was 0 for 2 from 3. Both of his 3-point attempts were wide open. Austin Rivers missed 3 3-point attempts in this game. Ant missed a couple of open ones. He was 1 of 4 from 3. He also hit one with his foot on the line. There were a lot of opportunities for this to be even better for the Wolves offensively. And they shot the ball so well in the paint that for the game, the Timberwolves were only a tick below 58% as a team from the field, but they're only 31% from 3. Overall, a strong offensive performance. The Wolves did, there were some issues. They missed Jay McDaniels was only 3 of 7 at the line. There were some sloppy stretches, but in general, they only turned it over 12 times. You can live with that. They also won the rebound battle. They actually out-rebounded Dallas by 6. They had 1 more offensive rebound than Dallas. This was a strong all-around performance for Minnesota, save for the Kyrie, just Kyrie fest in the fourth quarter, allowing this game to ultimately get down to a 3-point, only a 3-point margin of victory for the Wolves. But in general, a very strong performance. Happy with the offense, happy with the adjustments that Chris Finch made. And the Wolves end up holding on to win. I want to close with individual studs and duds. As we always do, we'll peek ahead at what's next for the Wolves this week. So we're going to do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at LinkedIn. As a small business owner or hiring manager, you know what success in 2023 all depends on the team that you surround yourself with. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals. LinkedIn Jobs helps you quickly attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with targeting tools. They go beyond resume data by using insights from your job post, company, and their 875 million member profiles, 875 million member profiles to put your post in front of the most qualified candidates. Identify the most qualified candidates on LinkedIn Jobs and connect with them fast and for free. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications, all in one platform. It's 2023, about 6 weeks into the calendar year. The right team member might help you achieve all of your goals this year. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's talk individual studs and duds from this one for the Wolves. Let's start with studs. #1 has to be Anthony Edwards. This was a pretty strong all-around game for Ant. He had 32 on 22 shots, only made 1 3, so you'll take that, right? 12 of 22, so efficient, like, especially early in this game, was just a bully getting downhill and getting to the basket. The type of energy and bounce that he's had a little bit more recently than he had earlier this season, and like when he brings that, he's quite literally unstoppable. He did get to the line 7 times, which was a breath of fresh air after he shot, 16 2-pointers on Friday against Memphis. Ant shot 16 twos and did not attempt a single free throw, which was an absolute miscarriage of justice. It made no sense at all. He ended up with 7 free throw attempts in this game on 22 shots. That's 18 2-point attempts. That ratio makes a lot more sense. 5 rebounds, 1 assist. By the way, though, still, Luka shot the ball 20 times and got 15 free throws. So, anyway, 5 rebounds, 1 assist, 3 turnovers for Ant, and a +9 in the plus-minus column for those of you that like that stat, which is the second best mark of any Timberwolves player in this game. Ant was very, very good. Again, offense early, a little bit, just enough offense in the fourth quarter, which, by the way, I talked about how good the Wolves' offensive ball movement was, and overall plan of attack was for most of this game. The fourth quarter was not one of those times. The Wolves scored 32 plus in each of the first 3 quarters, only 24 points in the fourth, and a big reason for that was the ball got sticky, the offense was stagnant. Ant was more than comfortable isolating, and he hit a couple of really tough shots in this game, but the offense did not look great in the fourth quarter. And we've seen that happen a few times this season, well, more than a few times this season, where the ball gets sticky in the fourth quarter. Everybody wants to help the team. Now, Ant's really the only guy I think that's going to do that at the moment, right? Towns never really did it quite as much. Occasionally he will, but no D'Lo, right? So it's pretty much Ant. Kyle Anderson took matters into his own hands a couple of times, but in general, he usually gets a pretty good shot off or gets fouled. So anyway, a good game overall for Ant. I think we'll take 32 and 5, 22 shots, and outstanding defense on the final possession for Anthony Edwards. I'm also going to give a stud to Rudy Gobert, 21 and 14 in this game, a by far game high, +17 in the plus-minus column. A perfect 9 of 9 from the field and a palatable 3 of 5 from the free throw line. 21 and 14, 1 assist. No blocks for Rudy. He did have 3 turnovers in this game, but again, a +17. And yeah, he may have been played off the floor late in this one, but they don't build a 26-point lead without Rudy's dominance in the paint and on the glass early in this game. Again, Rudy had 14 rebounds. Doncic had 12. Nobody else on the Mavs had more than 5 rebounds. And again, the Wolves out-rebounded Dallas by 6 in this game overall. Rudy really did control the paint. There was one sequence very early in the game. I forget who it was. I think it was Josh Green. Got the ball down low. Whoever it was on the Wolves that was guarding him flew by him. Green thought he had a layup or a dunk. Gobert kind of moves towards him, would have swatted him had he laid it up. Green kind of panics, and instead of pump faking again or going into the contact or shooting a reverse, he panics and tries to kind of sling the ball back out to the perimeter. It gets stolen. McDaniels goes the other way, gets an and one. And it was all generated by Rudy Gobert's defense. There were a couple of those plays where the idea of Rudy Gobert just absolutely petrified the Mavs and led to a missed shot, a turnover, etc. And that's the type of impact he can have that doesn't directly show up in the box score. But it's a big reason why Gobert, people know how good he is because he does he comes up with these plays, these either altered shots or really the rim deterrence, right? That is something that like our B-ball index measures rim deterrence. Like Rudy is so good at that. And that was big early in this game. And yes, late in the game, the Mavs got back into this game by playing small, forcing Gobert off the floor, but the Wolves still won, and they don't build the lead without Rudy. It's not very often that a team can come all the way back from a 26-point deficit to get to within a bucket. So that's not going to happen every night. And Rudy was generally very good in this game. My third stud goes to Jaden McDaniels. Not often we have all three studs in the starting lineup, but Jaden had 19 points, 7 of 8 shooting in this game. Again, just 3 of 7 at the line, but he hit a couple of big threes, 2 of 3 outside the arc. He had another 3 from the wing that was just massive in this game. In the last, it was kind of like late middle. I think it was like 3-4 minutes left in the game when Dallas was making one of their many runs, and McDaniels hit a really big 3. He did only have 4 rebounds, but he pitched in 2 assists, 2 steals, and a block, only turned it over once. And again, really good defense. Like foul trouble haunted him a little early, middle stages, but outstanding job by McDaniels to finish with only 4 personal fouls and not be on the brink of fouling out in this game. I've said it plenty of times already, but that defense in the final possession from both Ant and McDaniels was phenomenal. If I was going to name a fourth stud, which I'm not, of course, it would be Kyle Anderson. He played well, 12, 5, and 4, 5 assists plus 2 steals and a block for Anderson. If I had to pick a dud, this one's maybe a little controversial, but I guess if I have to pick one, I'm going to go with Naz Reid. I know Naz had 10 points off the bench. I know he was 4 of 9 shooting. Had a couple of assists, had a couple of rebounds. And the first part of Naz's first stint was incredible. He had a crossover that I swear it's the best crossover I've seen. Anybody sniffing 7 feet beyond maybe Kevin Durant and maybe that Kevin Garnett crossover. I think it was the playoffs against I believe it was against Chris Webber and the Kings, right? A very small handful of crossovers that rival what Naz did. Was it to Dwight Powell or was it to I think it was Christian Wood? Just a filthy crossover. A couple of really nice plays early in that stint. One really nice pass. But then he had a couple of ill-advised, like bad misses from the perimeter. He had a missed dunk. He had actually right before he got taken out in the second quarter, he contested a 3 late, stood there and watched it, didn't box out, didn't go for the rebound, didn't get back offensively in transition. He just kind of stood there. And I think this was also Christian Wood, got his own rebound, was fouled and completed an and one because Naz didn't bother to rebound. So there were a couple of those that stuck out to me. And Naz's stint was much shorter, or he really didn't actually. He got a very short third quarter stint, I believe, but did not play in the fourth quarter because of the Wolves going small. Nas played only 12 minutes, which was the least of any of the 10 players that saw the floor for the Wolves in this game. But it wasn't Naz's best game. I don't think he played horribly, but if I had to pick a dud, I thought that kind of the end of that first stint for Naz was pretty rough. And so I'd put him in that category. All right. Very good win for the Wolves. As I mentioned off the top, the Wolves have alternated wins and losses now for a couple of weeks. The last 8 games, now just 1 game before the All-Star break, and hopefully that streak of alternating wins and losses ends against the Washington Wizards on Thursday night, the rare Thursday night game that's not a TNT game, and that's in Minnesota as this, a 5-game road trip comes to an end. The Timberwolves will take on the 26 and 30 as of this recording Wizards on Thursday night at Target Center, leading into the All-Star break Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Of course, Ant is an injury replacement in the big game on Sunday as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that later this week. But Wolves Wizards on Thursday. That's all we have for you today. A big thank you to those of you who make Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, you can find the show on YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken, and that's with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Now, for your second listen, go check out the Locked On Game to Game NBA podcast. Every moment, every top performance, and every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.